Okay, good morning. We're about to start. I'm Tony Lapolito. I'm the Director of Product Management at Cisco for Videoscape Distribution Suite, which is their CDN product line. Prior to being at Cisco, I worked at a company called Signiant, who was very much involved in supply chain workflows and file exchange, involved in packaging and prep of digital assets for multi-screen delivery. So I have the Cisco TV Everywhere frame of reference, as well as a company that worked very closely with content providers. I like to start these type of sessions and try to figure out what the audience is made up of, so we can understand when we talk to you based on your frame of reference. So can I have a show of hands? Anyone here that's from CDNs? Okay, we have one. How about telcos or cable companies? A few people there. Content providers? A lot of those. How about content aggregators? Okay, one of those too. Okay, so we have a good group of mixed group, but a heavy concentration of content providers. So I think the topic will be very relevant, and I think our panel here represents a great cross section. Unlike some panels where I have a very much a frame of reference that this is the way to do things, I think in the world of packaging, of prep and packaging of content, there is no one size fits all. It's really about best practices for your given situation. So I think we have a great cross section of different companies here represented that will give you their perspective on things. It's interesting if you look at, I'll date myself. I grew up in a house that had one television, black and white, 4 channels. And then the problem became many channels. But then it was this changing event where we need to create a file for VOD. And that just changed everything. We need to create a file for iTunes. And I just sat through the Netflix presentation the last session, and just to sit there and just one company packaging content to deliver to their own subscribers on different devices. The problem just becomes very, very evident. And that's what we're facing. When I was at Signiant in 2007, NBC came to us and said, we need your help to build a content factory. And I think that's really a great way to look at this challenge is making sure that you build a factory that's highly optimized to produce what you need to produce for your consumers. So again, we'll dig into that and see what the best practices are around that and some of the challenges as well. So with that, I'll allow my esteemed colleagues here to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Idan Cohen, co-founder and head of product at Boxy. For those of you who don't know Boxy or need a little update, then we currently sell a device called the Boxy TV, which allows you to access live channels through an over-the-air antenna or basic cable connection. Allows you to record those channels, and it actually records them into the cloud. So there's a DVR in the cloud with unlimited storage that then can be watched either on your TV or on any other device anywhere you are, so also outside of the house. And in addition has regular content services like Netflix or Vudu. So currently exclusive at Walmart, and have been out since the holiday season.
My name is Kevin Loudon. I'm a product manager at Telestream. Telestream is, I think, the only actual manufacturer here on the panel. We make a variety of video technologies, hardware and software, anywhere from free plugins. We make the Flip for Mac Windows Media plugin. Show of hands, anybody use that on a Mac? Right, so most people probably know us at least from that. We also make a variety of video transcoding and repurposing tools for Mac and Windows, from desktop tools all the way up to very large enterprise class server-based video transcoding tools that are used by everybody along the chain. And that's it.
My name is Jeff Malkin. I'm president at encoding.com. We are a leading cloud-based video transcoding and universal delivery platform. Simply, we enable video to work on the increasing number of devices and browsers and set-top boxes currently in market. We work with about 3,000 companies now, and with an emphasis in the media and entertainment space, video platforms and service providers, and education as well.
So, and I'm Gonzalo de la Vega. I'm CEO and president of Nice People at Work. Nice People at Work is a Spanish-based company. We do three things. We do multi-DRM content packaging, multi-CDN content delivery, and real-time analytics with information streaming back to us from a plugin we embed on the player. So in terms of this panel, I'd like to collaborate on how it is we can do content preparation and transcoding, understanding what's happening on the other side and understanding what the player requirements are. In terms of history, Nice People at Work is co-founder of Wacky TV, Wacky without an H, which is a Spanish online video club recently acquired by Rakuten Group. So we understand we have been 4.5 years working on premium video.
Great. So as you can see, we have a great cross-section of various types of companies and perspectives. So I expect this to be a very interesting panel. So the first question I think you need to start with, this is called content prep and transcoding. So in this particular action, what does it include from your perspective? When you think about content prep, where do the lines begin and end for that particular function? So I'll start here with you, Eden.
Yeah, so for instance, I'll just give you a little bit of a technical dive, a little bit into what we do. So for us, we have an actual device connected in people's living rooms that's connected to, let's assume an antenna. So that means it gets the broadcast through an ATSC standard, which is what the transmission is, but then it's actually transport stream MPEG-2 encoded. And then we actually upload that into the cloud and store that for every user when he chooses to record the TV show. But then when he wants to play it back, then we actually transcode it in real time into H.264 and deliver it according to the device that he's playing it on. So we built this whole system in-house. We really wanted to use off-the-shelf solutions. We could not find anything that would fit the exact technical spec that we needed and that could be adapted in the time frame that we had, and we had to build the whole thing ourselves. For storing, from AWS for transcoding, CloudFront for delivery. This is a little bit of what we're doing.
Kevin?
Me?
What do you consider content prep and transcoding?
Well, I guess for us, because we're involved sort of throughout the chain, so our tools sort of get used for prep from the camera to editorial, prep from editorial to broadcast operations or syndication distribution, prep for international distribution, prep for final delivery. So I guess maybe from our perspective, in that we're a tools manufacturer, there's various points of prep that have to happen. But I think in sort of this discussion, I would say a lot of the prep is sort of maybe that last stage, which is sort of final distribution and syndication and prep for final delivery, where you may be picking and choosing from different audio tracks for languages and things like that. Actual doing the transcoding, which could take one single file, which may be a distribution file, and encoding 30, 40, 50, sometimes different iterations or renditions of that, matching up closed captioning and burning in subtitles and prepping metadata so that things like a boxy box can get the poster frame and the description and all that. So that's, in this context, that's probably the most amount of content.
What about ad insertion? Is that important too? Is that something?
Absolutely, and sometimes that prep has to be done at different stages. You're marking in points. You might be actually physically breaking up segments.
Or setting keyframes.
Setting keyframes, all that. So it happens at different times, but I think in the purposes of what we're interested in, it's that end bit, which gets kind of mushrooms.
Yeah, playing off what Kevin said, I mean, for us at encoding.com, generally content prep and packaging for us starts receiving a mezzanine file. Right. That's from the post-production house or the media company, the content provider that's already been QA'd, it might be an MXF, a ProRes, MPEG-2 file, and then from there, the packaging and prep that we're doing, obviously, is transcoding, closed captioning, packaging for adaptive bitrate delivery, and DRM. I would say for us, that's how we would define that.
And for us, we work mostly with Hollywood content, being films and series, and broadcaster content, live television and TV content. For us, content preparation starts from the minute we get the master from Hollywood for the major studio, or we get the feed from the TV broadcaster. It involves anything from the encoding, and then the packaging on the DRM, encrypting that file and managing the interaction with the license servers to make sure the viewer on the other end is going to be able to watch that content. So making sure we understand about the device particularities and how we're going to be delivering that license. And there's also the ad insertion, absolutely, for which we create, like you guys said, the spaces, and we break up the file for it to be ready for ad insertion. And that's basically what we cover. So it's mostly DRM packaging, encoding and transcoding, and preparing it for advertising.
Great. Okay, so it seems like there's lots of different components. So what are the biggest challenges that you think, from your perspective, various people in the supply chain face in basically making multi-screen content?
Well, I can break the ice on that. At least sharing a problem that we have found whilst working on this, which is a DRM. The difference in formats and the proliferation of devices. I'm going to use a Cisco figure, as we said before, Tony, but there's 50 billion connected devices. We agree that's the Internet of Things, so that includes things like, connected shoelaces. But in any case,
Are there connected shoelaces?
I don't know, there's connected flugel binders, but and we can come back to that later. In that sense, really understanding the amount of devices and the differences in DRM. I mean, if we all have been working on this, I'm sure everybody in the room understands the problems right now in delivering a live feed with DRM and packaging it and delivering to certain devices. There's the whole wideband issue right now. Mm-hmm. And I think we're all looking forward to what's going to happen with HTML5 and things like what Apple and Microsoft and Google are doing in DRM for HTML5. But in the meantime, it creates a great space for us to work in because we do DRM services. So we're happy with it being a complex scenario. But I'm sure that's a challenge faced in terms of how do you decide the best encryption profile, the best DRM profile to address the different devices.
Yeah, I think the challenge is much more on the content provider. I mean, for us, evangelizing the chaos is good for business, but the chaos is real. And at Encoding.com, our challenge as a vendor is automating and scaling all of these various functions that you need in order to deliver your content to all the different devices. So, playing off DRM for an example, being able to add Google Widevine or Microsoft PlayReady or Adobe Flash Access encryption capabilities to an API that can be plugged into a workflow that also can register that content with your key servers, et cetera, is just one of many examples of the complexity around scaling, MPEG to transport stream cable lab spec delivery is another great example. Yeah. So, again, I think the challenge is more on what you guys have to face, and it's an expensive challenge as well.
Before Kevin answers that, I'd like to ask you something. Does every client that approach you basically have the same challenge, or is it different for everyone?
There are common themes, but there is an unbelievable amount of variety.
Good answer.
in workflow requirements, hooks into various CMS applications, and subtitling in many different languages, and closed captioning, and just closed captioning alone. There's an amazing amount of variety. So, the common themes obviously are going to be around delivering MP4 H.264 in some type of adapted bitrate package to all the various mobile devices would be a common theme, but on top of that, there are many varieties.
I figured as much.
That's me. Well, I guess, I think I said this before with mushrooming, but as you get closer to the viewer, the complexity grows sort of exponentially. You've got a movie, and then a movie gets made into multiple distribution mezzanine files, and that's what kind of goes to these guys, And then from that, they're blowing that out even farther for iOS and for Android and for Flash, and everything else. And this is going to this country, so it has this kind of subtitling, and this is going here, and it's got this kind. And this particular content is coming from this content provider, and they're providing their metadata this way, and it needs to be translated to get to here. So as you get closer to the actual viewer, the amount of prep that you have to do grows wider and wider and wider. So, making sure you either have tools that do that or have people who can do it for you is very important because it gets very complex.
So for us, for instance, all of that is definitely problems that we face as well. But unlike the three of these guys, which are in the business of giving services, and for them, if they need to transcode into 10 different formats with 3 different DRMs, that's obviously a good problem to have because you can charge more. And for us, I think that for someone like us that at the end of the day needs to sell a product and a service and do it profitably to a customer, then for us it's important to keep costs as low as possible. So for instance, one of our solutions was to save the original content, the content that comes, the broadcast channels that come from the antenna, from the broadcast, to save them in their original format and only transcode them on demand. So if someone records a show and never plays it, then we never needed to transcode it. We never needed to store that unique content that was made for an iPhone compared to the unique version that was made for an iPad or for a TV in HD. So these are solutions that we had to come up with in order to keep our costs low. And this is definitely something that from a service provider that is selling the service to the end customer who's just a user, and you're charging $5 or $10 a month for it, then that's a problem that you need to take into account.
Actually, that's a great segue, because if you think about it, if you are charging a flat rate fee or a service that's bundled like HBO Go, the more transcoding and prep of various formats, it's all biting into your gross margin. So I think that's a great point of, where do you, what do you prep ahead of time versus do just-in-time prep? A gentleman at Apple once told me that the way they work with their library is a lot like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. As soon as you're done at one end, you have to go back and start doing it all over again. So it's an endless process.
And I think that you were in the Netflix conversation, but I think that last time I heard they were prepping 40, but maybe even more formats for every piece of content that they have.
Yeah. And they're doing the same thing. They keep it, and then if they need to spin off more when the next box device, whatever comes out, I'm sure you guys do the same thing.
We do a lot of business from that.
Yeah.
Every time biz dev guy comes into the room and says, "Great, I just got us our Hulu distribution deal, or Amazon, or you name it." Then
run it through the factory.
We're going to get the same catalog and we're going to redo it all over again.
Yep.
But we all know, okay, so Hangover 3 comes out, on multi-screen. You're going to prep it in 40 different flavors. Gone with the Wind, you're really going to make that standard definition Wii player format. So how do you balance that? Pre-prep versus just-in-time content preparation. Is there a right formula for that? Can you share some experiences with that? What does it even apply to in your case?
Yeah. So.
Well, you cited a great example of it, but
I'll just answer quickly. And I think that we're still in the learning stage. So we're trying to figure out what's the right combination of things that should be prepped in advance, so we can save because we're doing it beforehand, compared to things that are done on demand. So we haven't got to that point yet, but I think that in the future we'll start doing sort of shows that we know are popular and we know will be viewed on, or we have the right numbers around what's the preferred devices and prime time compared to other times of the day. Then we'll do that beforehand and save those and deliver them to the CDN beforehand, even before they were requested, compared to other things. But these are, for us, we're still at an early stage. We haven't got to that point.
So again, I'll interrupt before we get to Kevin again with a follow-up with you. So how are you actually figuring out what you should deal with on a proactive basis versus a reactive basis? Is there a formula? Is there a method of collecting that type of information?
We have the numbers and we can see exactly, what type of content is consumed in which areas, actually geographically, so we know the right place to distribute it to. We know what kind of devices are used more. But although we have these numbers right now, we haven't got to the point where we're actually implementing those learnings into our process and our work.
Okay, that's an interesting follow-up, but we'll come back to that one later, I guess. Kevin?
I think that one thing I've always heard people say, and content is never as valuable as when it's live. So when you have that content that is timely, sort of doing that method of spinning it off and getting it out to as many people as possible very, very quickly is. But when you get into that long tail content, I think probably everybody would come up with a different methodology of deciding, when do I spin it sort of live or repurpose it on demand, and also the requirements of the viewership of that content may dictate when you can do that or not. I'm not sure. Like, are there certain features that you can't do when you do that? Subtitling and things like that. So, those burning in titles and things like that you may not be able to do that sort of when someone requests it. So that stuff may need to be prepped ahead of time.
I think, storage, while, it's
Certainly.
commoditized and prices are coming down quickly, when you're dealing with petabytes, it's still a very expensive
Right.
line item. And so one of the things that we see our, studio broadcaster customers doing is at least, coming up with a mezzanine format that is high enough quality but low enough in file size to be the starting point for kicking off jobs for every time they get these new distribution deals, to do that transcoding from that point, all the content packaging from that point. But your question about like which content is more valuable and which should be transcoded and maybe sit on the shelf, with television content that needs to be, that tends to go live within 24 hours, that's getting transcoded immediately into all the various flavors. And but we have these conversations a lot, and it's a purely, as you would guess, a financial issue on how deep you want to go in your back catalog. But we tend to, from what I've seen from our customers, is the larger ones tend to transcode the entire catalog, over and over again, starting from that mezz.
Is that just because they don't know where to start, begin and end? They don't have the intelligence to know that that the tail is cut off at 65% of their catalog?
Yeah, I think that's probably a big part of it. If these guys, have capabilities of providing much more analysis, I think we can get a lot more efficient in that, certainly.
Yeah, that seems like a big challenge, an interesting one.
I mean, I think it's very much, it's like cooking. So, every time you're going to do a service setup, you need to come up with a slightly different recipe. We're all making chicken salad, but there's many different ways to make chicken salad. Do people put the sauce at the beginning? Do you chop the chicken halfway through? You need to understand the requirements in terms of the device mark. Not all broadcasters or not all customers are going to want to address the same number of devices. Some are going to be very much focused on mobile. Some of them are going to be very much focused on set-top boxes and catch-up TV. I think, like these guys said, you need to understand which of the content you're going to be preparing first. And in many of our customers, we found that they have simultaneous things living together, including which CDNs or which delivery methods they use for distributing that content. They have my content where I'm going to be investing less money, my Gone with the Wind, and I have my sort of evergreens or hot content that's going to have a higher rotation and it's going to have to be ready before. Again, the secret is in the mix. How is each one of us going to make that chicken salad for that customer we have, and how we're going to make those ingredients? There is no one formula. That's all. You should always have half on. You should be pre-prepared, and the other half shouldn't be. Or there is no mathematical formula in terms of the distribution of the content you're going to have. You really must have several different ways implemented simultaneously to understand where you should be putting each of those efforts.
And a lot of that gets driven by the content owner, I think. They have a very good idea of how they want that content to be shared with their viewership.
Well, they'll give you the spec. Many times guys like Disney and big content providers will say, please send me back the file because I want to make sure that when you're encoding my Tron movie, I want Tron. I've spent, a gazillion dollars in making Tron look cool, and I want to make sure that your encoding process and your content preparation doesn't make Tron look any little bit less cool than
Right.
the money we made it. You know, there's a lot of investment behind that. And many of these guys will say, we need to get back a sample file and we need to see how you guys are doing things in terms of content preparation to approve or not approve what you guys are doing.
We have Encoding.com has a product called Vidly, which is a universal video delivery platform, what we call it, which basically one file in, and then we ensure it's going to work on every device, browser, and set-top box in market. And it's a fluctuating number, but you might want to know that we create 25 output renditions that we guarantee will work on 6,000 devices and browsers. So, case in point, not everybody needs to cover all 6,000 devices and browsers. So, you know, we eventually had to have a kind of another set of output renditions we call Vidly Lite, which I don't like the name of, but that's what we call it. And that has 5 or 6 output renditions that work on 95% of the market. And then we have, you know, Vidly Lite plus HD, or, you know, and you keep making these different packages depending on, you know, what the customer need is. And so do you need to cover 95% of the market? Is that enough? You know, do you need the edge cases?
Right.
And then, by the way, those renditions I'm not calculating any permutations around closed captioning or subtitling or other things that would,
That's very interesting. Is that, so do you give them packages and it works? Or does it become a package plus something else where you're essentially creating a la carte for every customer?
Well, we from a scale perspective, we try not to do a different package for every customer. That's the whole point. It's, you know, we're just going to give you this embed code. So at the moment, while we came out with one package, 25 out, whatever number is, it fluctuates up and down 1 or 2, 25 output renditions, have, you know, in the market for 2 years now, we now have probably 5 or 6 packages.
So is there and this goes back to them not knowing, is there a diminishing returns? It's almost to the point where it's like, well, I'm getting 95% out of this one package of 5 formats, but it's only going to cost me $1 more or some number that's trivial that's going to get them to the full package. You know, again,
It's the opposite of that, though. It becomes quite expensive to get that last 5%.
Exactly.
okay. So it is almost linear then. You know, from 5 to 25 is 5x or some variation of that. So it's
Yeah, it's agreed. Yes.
yeah,
That 5% will have the highest level of complexity.
Yeah.
You get the same trade-off when you're deciding what DRM to use as a packaging for a certain file. I mean, many devices will take several DRM formats, and the secret, again, is in the mix of how you make your chicken salad again. But again, how you decide, I mean, you need to understand what devices you need to address, and then make a trade-off on the lowest common denominator of DRM. You could be addressing certain devices with Widevine or ProRadio or Adobe. If you look at all of them, then you understand what is my lowest number of DRMs with whom I can address the requirements that my customer has. He wants to
And even
address-
Widevine DRM is various versions for all the different output platforms.
Yeah, no comment on wideband DRM because there's no swearing on the panel, but
okay. So
you give it a tough
this
time,
should be
very tough time.
this should be a good question. So, what would you advocate? Build your own infrastructure, data center, go your own content factory, or use cloud-based services? And if what's the role and the benefits of using the cloud? So I can't, you know, I'm actually been waiting to hear the answers to this one myself. So I've been waiting to ask this question. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I have no doubt that don't build it yourself. I think that there needs to be companies and services that specialize in these kind of services, and that's the way it should be done. The problem right now, as I said, for instance, is that when you come and you try, especially when you're not doing something which is just, you know, very standard. So obviously, for instance, in most cases, regular studio content being delivered to content aggregators and distributors, that's kind of standardized. Obviously, there's a lot of things that could be done better and cut costs on a lot of different aspects. But at the end of the day, it's a little bit more standardized. But when you're trying to build some kind of a more innovative service, there still is a lot of blanks. Having said that, we would have loved to not build those and just connect different services together. If there was an easy layer on that could have done the on-demand transcoding that we needed, and we've tried a few, but we ended up building it ourselves, that would have been a much preferable solution for us.
Okay, so Kevin, I'm assuming that Eden doesn't work in sales for you guys because
Oh, well, no, that's fine. You know,
I'm just expecting a different answer from you.
well, I mean, like I said, we build tools, and our tools get used by people like this sometimes. Sometimes they build their own, sometimes they buy it from us. Sometimes the end customers buy it from them. And so in some ways we compete with services, in some ways we sell to services. So for us, I don't think it necessarily really matters that much, especially with the on the ground in the cloud thing. For us, I think it's more of where is your content, where does it live? Does it live in all kinds of different places all over the world? And it has to it has to travel over the internet anyway to get anywhere for prep. Well, then the cloud's a great place for it to actually house the factory that's actually going to do all the work on the stuff. If all your stuff's on the ground and you don't want it to go up in the cloud until it's done, well, then build something on the ground. If you don't want to build anything yourself and you just want to, you know, pay someone to do it, there's plenty of talented people that can do it for you. So it really depends on where your content is, where it's coming from, where it's going to go after that, and what kind of money you want to spend, whether you want to spend money on hardware and doing all that yourself, or you want to just rent it, for lack of a better word, in which case you can run your own gear in the cloud, or you can get services from people like these guys. It really all depends on what your particular needs are and where your content is, in my perspective, I think.
Well, I'll tell you, that's a dramatic change from one day when I walked into FX and I saw a Telestream transcoder under a director's desk, and she was transcoding promos herself, to, you know, half an hour a day, and you know, and basically her own little content factory in her office. So, you know, the ability to do it in the cloud changes things dramatically.
Yeah, and the term cloud is kind of, I don't know, it can get used in a lot of different ways. You know, some people say, you know, when some people think of the cloud, they think of a service, like encoding.com. Others, it's just that box, instead of being under someone's desk, is running on an AWS instance. It's still the same thing.
Yeah,
it may be convenient because they've got a hard drive with stuff, and plugging it into the computer under their desk is more convenient, or the content's coming from Disney over Aspera or Signiant, you know, and it's getting dropped on S3 storage, so having the actual thing up there already is more convenient.
And scaling it.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah, that's important because you can have it under your desk, or you can basically move that into the cloud using, you know, infrastructure as a service.
Yeah, I mean, even us, like, you know, we're software tool vendors. You know, we're building a version of our Vantage software that you can spin up on AWS. You know, in 10 minutes, you can have 20 servers running our software.
Yeah, that becomes competitive.
And
with
that's
encoding.com.
just a choice, because
Sort
our customers, yeah. But still, if you go to us, you know, so if you guys come to us and you buy our tools, and whether you run it in AWS or whether you run it on the ground, you have to figure out, you know, where's my closed captioning coming from? Where's my mezzanine? I'm gonna choose. You have to design everything. These guys do the design for you. You know,
So
that's the difference.
We'll let Jeff answer, but it sounds like Jeff, the secret sauce with Transcoding.com is not the technology or the compute power. It's the expertise in taking the complexity out of the problem. It's just, you know, here it is, and it becomes mindless for the people that you deal with the complexity.
Your question is, you know, it's my favorite question: cloud versus infrastructure. You know,
Your answers are easy.
there are lots of pros and cons, mostly pros, of leveraging, you know, cloud. No, the reality is, true use of the cloud, you're going to benefit from the dynamic elasticity of the cloud, which means you're able to light up 1, 50, 100, or 1,000 servers at any given moment, depending on demand, and which creates incredible efficiencies. So, you know, cloud computing, and as it pertains to transcoding, it solves some headaches, not all, but some headaches related to managing your own infrastructure. But certainly, you know, you don't have queues backing up as your demand is pretty spiky. You don't have to invest in infrastructure, and I think the you know, a straw that breaks the camel's back has to do with the fact that even having this conversation today is because of the complexity of the video technologies changing so rapidly. So when you do invest in infrastructure, you need to continue investing in that infrastructure. And there's plenty of use cases that suggest you should do that. But if that's a pain point for you where you drop your Amex Black Card on a whole bunch of infrastructure and 6 months later it doesn't support what your marketing guy says you have to support, that's a problem. And if your queues are backing up and that same marketing guy is getting angry because his end users are waiting for their content to be transcoded because you have a farm of 20 servers but you really need 100 at that moment, that's also a problem. So I think cloud has the ability to solve some key points. And as Kevin mentioned, where the proximity of your source content is a key question to ask, because although I think the problem is getting better because of Signiant and Aspera, moving large files through the public internet can be expensive, can take time. So what we're seeing with a lot of the larger media and studio customers we have is a hybrid approach.
Correct.
Right? So you do have some infrastructure that you manage. Maybe it's to create that initial mezzanine, maybe it's to do more than that. But you leverage, cloud when does it make sense to, invest in a huge amount of infrastructure for 2 or 3 projects to transcode your entire catalog for, Hulu and Amazon and Netflix and Boxy, or does it make sense to, leverage a service provider to do that for you? So I think lots of different use cases, but, we're certainly seeing from the large media companies, whereas 4 years ago when we launched, wouldn't even take my phone calls, to now most of them are using us for some use case. So I think the fear of security and the fear of moving these large files around and being helped by UDP technologies is really kind of bringing down those barriers.
Yeah. And just to add to that, but everything has basically been said. I agree with Kevin, and it's a matter of choice. I mean, most of us have a car, I have a car, and then sometimes I still take a cab. And it really depends on what necessity I have right now. It depends on how the proximity of the content. I mean, the cloud gives you the benefit of being able to pay as you go. I mean, I can only pay when I'm going to use it at a certain given point in time. I turn on the tap. It's scalable to infinite. Whereas dedicated infrastructure is closer to where I have my content management system, to where my flow is happening, to where my infrastructure is. Again, am I a broadcaster with very high requirements, or am I a premium, am I a Netflix of this world? What are my needs and what I want to do? I know I've given the same answer twice. I know it's not very good for panels, but again, it really is a matter of choice. There is no one way or the other, and it's all about taking the pros and cons and understanding whether the integration you need is deeply entrenched into your CMS, and I really need to have my stuff on-premise because I want to save myself from sending all these files over the internet and having to pay for the storage of all these transcoded files, or do I want to use a cloud service where I just turn the tap on and off, or do I need to use a mixture of both? Which for most of our customers, again, mainly TV broadcasters and premium, guys dealing with premium video, so somebody's actually paid for this experience, that's where we have most of our expertise, and none of our customers have only one of those implementations. Most of them use both. They have some kind of implementation on premise, and they have a plug on the cloud for live events, sudden spikes in demand, or unexpected surges in capacity requirements.
Okay, so this is the last question before we take some questions from the crowd. So is format proliferation out of control? Is it something that we've reached a stable point? Jeff mentioned around 25. Or is it going to continue to grow? Or is it going to contract? Or is it like taxes? We just have to assume it's going to be, just assume you have to deal with it and it's around 24 to 25 or 40 forever. Is there some way to solve this problem such there is a create once, play anywhere type environment, and in any type of resolution with any type of subtitling, et cetera, et cetera? Or is this just something we have to live with and accept? And we've reached stability.
No, I think it's actually going to, maybe at some point in the future it's going to be better, but in the near future it's going to be worse. So with H.265 and VP9 that Google just have been showing at Google I/O, there's going to be more formats and more devices playing unique formats. So Chrome is going to support VP9, and then Safari or other devices made by Apple are going to support something else. And then there's talks about X265 actually doing a better job. So we're going to see a new wave of encoding standards that are going to create more formats for, that we'll need to create, more devices with different variations that we'll need to support. And it will become, I think, more complicated in the short term. More storage costs, more computing costs. It will definitely get messier.
So more complexity before there's any sanity to it. Kevin, your thoughts?
I mean, I don't know if it's ever going to get, one thing plays everywhere, ever. I don't know. I kind of think it's a little bit better now than it was, say, 6 years ago or 5 years ago.
Because WMV has disappeared, and
In real,
and
you
Reel
know,
disappeared.
so,
Flash had a short window of
Yeah.
kind of
yeah,
being dominant.
you can go a lot of places with an H.264 file with AAC audio, in various types of wrappers or segmentations and things like that. I mean, H.264 with AAC, all of your adaptive bit rates support that. You just have to package it in a different way. But that's where the disparity and the complexity comes into. It's like it's the same essence files, but you have to package it in a different way, segment it differently, and manifest it differently, and all that. So in some ways, I think it's gotten a little easier codec-wise, but sort of format and packaging-wise, probably it's filled that vacuum, that space left with that, and maybe H.265 will maybe mellow things out a little bit. But I think there's always going to be some disparity. And then when you get into the subtitling and all that other stuff, I think it's just always going to be there. I mean, like Boxy, they're competing with this box and that box and that box. And Apple is competing with Google, and Google is competing with Microsoft, and everybody is competing. There's always going to be that innovation and difference for competition. But that's what makes everything go.
There is a war going on, yes.
And it's not going to stop.
If you remember back in the day, 5, 6, 7 years ago, when if you were in the mobile space, and I had a company developing apps for the mobile space before the iPhone existed, and Java came out, and that was the best thing ever, right? You were going to develop once; it was going to play on every device out there that supported Java. Except Sony Ericsson's Java was different than Samsung's Java. It was different than Nokia's Java. HTML5 comes out, and then HTML5 video, great. We just get to deploy video once, and it works on all the browsers, except IE is different than Chrome, is different than Safari. So I think with billions of dollars at stake, and you mentioned the big four, Adobe, Apple, Google, Microsoft, I don't think anybody's relenting on whose proprietary algorithms are going to win out. So I think again, I said it earlier that I sort of see it as my job to evangelize the chaos, but it's not bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really up to guys like us on this table. I'm going to take a couple of Cisco figures. Again, 50 billion connected devices very soon, 86% of the internet traffic being video. So, and premium video being on the rise. Again, people are paying more and more. If you guys remember how much it costed, how much difficult it was for us to acquire stuff over our iPhones 5, 6 years ago. We had to pay $1.79 for the WhatsApp. I remember I was like, I'm not paying for this. And I think yesterday or the day before yesterday, I bought a new trousers for my avatar for like $20. So all of these barriers are coming down. And premium video is here to stay. Video is here to stay. And again, all these, we actually use 42 formats into which we're encoding files. It is not efficient. There is a lot of pressure on companies like us to reduce costs, to be able to offer a better service and a more efficient service. Having somebody select from his computer, you guys remember, you have an ISDN connection or broadband connection, a cable connection, you have to choose your connection, and then you'd be sort of dealing yourself your cards. Same today with YouTube, you can still select you want to be watching a video at 320, 720, what quality you want to be watching that video on. I think the pressure is on guys like us to make a more efficient system to do this. The more we get intelligent or smart content preparation, which is something I wanted to bring into the discussion, the more we get real-time, the more real-time becomes easy to understanding at any given point in time what your customers are doing, what bitrate they're watching the video with, the information that they have on watching the video, is going to allow you to make just-in-time and adapted content preparation, rather than just trying to make 42 formats and trying to see how those reach to your audience. The process needs to go swim a little bit more upstream and have a little bit, it be a little bit more prepared. Again, when somebody is actually paid to watch a movie, it will not do if the quality is not good enough. The guy has paid. All his friends are watching it for free, and he's made an investment. He wants his service provider to make an investment on the quality that he receives. If I paid $2 to watch a movie or whatever amount of money, I want to make sure every single line of definition of my 50-inch plasma disc screen gets used. And for that, you don't really need to, you need to be very reactive and to be able to apply brains and intelligence. And again, it's easy for me to say this, it's hard to develop, but you need to be able to really tailor-make every single solution you make and try to make it more reactive to what the reality is rather than a hit and miss bunch of formats, which really is, I hope that it's one of these 42 formats is going to be the one that you want. It's more like, I know exactly what you want, I know what device you have, I know when you're running in, I know the time of the day you're in, I know your ISP, so I know I know what you need, and I know what packaging you need in terms of DRM, and I know what encryption, and I know exactly how to deliver this video to you, individual person at the other end of the internet.
That sounds like a great topic for our next panel.
Done.
So Q&A is the only thing that's standing in the way between lunch, so we can go as long as you want to keep asking questions. This gentleman here.
I have a question for Jeff. With regard to 4K and HEVC, are you seeing any demand or interest from your customers? What's their time frame?
Well, the
Repeat
question was, are we seeing any interest or demand for HEVC or 4K? And Kevin and I were just talking about this before. Encoding.com is very reactive, much more at the end of the end of the cycle with regards to what we support. We're very customer driven. We don't build it unless there's demand for it, and we haven't built it yet. So we have not heard a lot of demand. We're getting a lot of I would say interesting questions about it. Are you guys thinking about doing this yet? But no one said, here's a checkbook. Can you support this yet?
Okay, next question. Back there.
The target devices, if you focus your 95% package, I believe you mentioned, how is that list compiled and how is it maintained? How do you get the targets and what do you use to decide what is on that list and what isn't? And the follow-up to that is, what's the cost difference between the 95% and the 100%? We're going to have clients that say, well, how much is
So I heard a few questions in there. We use a third-party provider to help us with the data and on the most popular devices in market quarterly. We use another third party to where we do all our testing on all these various different devices and browsers. A lot of it comes from just customers also. They're knowledgeable about what devices and platforms they want to support. They know it's iOS, they know it's Android, they know it's web, and other iterations from there. I can't give a cost differentiate, between because there's so many other factors that affect that 5% with hosting and streaming and so forth and so on. Just from a transcoding perspective, the cost is probably 4 times greater to do the full 100% than to do the 95%, would be my best guess.
And these third parties that you mentioned, do you have recommendations that others could use as a reference?
Yeah, Device Anywhere is a very cool service, Device Anywhere, who provides testing on virtual labs for all these different devices and browsers.
We use them.
There's 3 references.
Sounds like we need to put the Device Anywhere people on the next panel as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, sir.
What's your experience with live streaming and with respect to what architecture cloud-based systems? How would you suggest that?
Question is, what's our experience with live streaming? Or do we have any?
I know you suggested a cloud system, but how do you, is there a specific architecture that you would suggest?
I don't know exactly how to answer that question. We do live streaming. We do it quasi-live, I would say. It's about a minute delay because of the time it takes us to transcode it in real time. But we're using kind of the same infrastructure, just instead of storing it and later prepping it, we do it on demand. And then the one thing I can tell you a little bit is that, especially when it comes to managing these kind of services with Amazon, then there can be differences from scaling something as you have more demand and having reserved instances, for instance, to do something specifically. So we do, for instance, we know that we have a certain threshold of how many live streams happen at specific times, and so we keep specific services that we kind of pay in advance for, and that's the way we reduce costs. That's just an interesting anecdote about how you can do it a little more efficiently.
Agreed.
And with respect to switching languages and closed captions, how do you, I mean, what is your experience?
So it's a little easier for us specifically because we also control all of the players. So you can only watch our content, specifically the Boxy DVR content. You can only watch it on our players if it's on an iPad or an iPhone or an Android or a browser. It's always our player, so we can deliver. We deliver the subtitles. We don't have it out yet, but we're working on that. So we deliver the closed captioning as a separate stream that we kind of display on top. So it's easier for us to do that. We don't need to count on someone else's player. But definitely, I mean, everything that these guys are doing, they have that problem much more. So it's a little easier when you're doing your own kind of. That's one of the examples, by the way, talking before about do it in-house versus doing it with someone else. This is kind of the things that you can solve for yourself when you have kind of a complete value chain that you're closed in.
Okay, let me take one last question, if there are any of them. Or is everyone too hungry? Panel? Thank you very much.